Right. So today we are going to start with chapter 13. We have 3 chapters left. I think 13, 14, 15. 3 chapters left, yeah. And chapter 16 is going to be one of your online chapters. So chapter 13 is about spinal cord, and you might have done that in your lab, but this will give you a better idea. So the spinal cord is actually connecting the brain to the rest of the body. Okay. So the brain is your main command center. And you can think of the spinal cord like the connection between the rest of the body and the brain. So the in-between. But having said that, don't underestimate it. It's not just like a cable connection connecting the two. It is much more than that. For example, when you're walking, you are having a lot of impulses because when you walk, you have to move your left leg, then you have to move your right leg. So there's a lot of flexion, extension, a lot of things happening when you're walking. And the brain is not giving the order every second. It is actually the spinal cord which does all that. So if there's something which is repetitive, the spinal cord takes over and does it. So there's a lot of integration, neural integration happening in the spinal cord. And also, the spinal cord is involved in reflexes. So what is a reflex? A reflex is when you touch a hot object or a sharp object, you immediately pull your hand, even before you know your hand is pulled. That is, if you know it, that means your brain is involved. But here, your brain is not involved. It's your spinal cord. Spinal cord takes a decision and it moves your hand out of danger. And then the brain will come to know that there's a hot object or whatever, which is going to cause you some harm. So the spinal cord has an element of neural integration. So what is the spinal cord? So the spinal cord is like a round cord of tissue, about 1.8 centimeters thick and 45 centimeters long, which means it is the thickness of your thumb and the length of your forearm. So that's what the spinal cord is. And coming out of the spinal cord, there are spinal nerves. And where is it located? It's located below the brain. So below the brain exits through the big foramen. What is that called? Foramen magnum, yes. So from the foramen magnum, and it extends up to approximately L1 level. But after that, it continues as something else, and I'll talk about that in a second. And if you look at the spinal cord, there are some regions. There's a cervical region, thoracic region, there's a lumbar region, and there is a sacral region. So these are the regions of the spinal cord. And so I told you it starts from the foramen magnum, and around L1, it stops. It does not really stop, but there's a little conical area there, like a cone. That area is called the medullary cone or conus medullaris. And after that, it's not like the spinal cord. It's like a bunch of nerves, which is like a horse's tail. So that's why this part here below the conus medullaris or medullary cone is called the cauda equina. Cauda equina means horse's tail. So it's like a horse's tail. All the nerves are coming out, but it's not like the spinal cord. It's like a horse's tail, which is all the nerves coming out. So this is a cauda equina. So, but that doesn't mean it's just flapping there. It is actually connected right down to the coccyx. So over here, you have the coccyx, which is otherwise called the tailbone. And this connection between the conus medullaris and the coccyx is called the filum terminale. That is actually one of the protective layers of the brain, of the spinal cord, which is the pia mater. It's a condensation of the pia mater. And the whole idea is to anchor the spinal cord. Otherwise, it'll be flapping around. And in the spinal cord, if you look at it carefully, you can see, maybe you don't see it properly here, but there's a little enlargement here, slight widening. This is called the cervical enlargement, which is in the cervical area, that is the neck area. And there's one in the lumbar area, that's a lumbosacral enlargement. Usually enlargement happens when there's a lot of spinal nerves coming out. So those are the two main areas where spinal nerve comes out from every single segment. But over here, there's a concentration of nerves coming out. Let's look at the protective layers of the spinal cord. The protection is called meninges. So meninges is a three-layered protection. So if you remember DAP, dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. These are the three layers. Dura is that strong, leathery membrane, and it does not stick to bone. So the spinal cord is inside the vertebral canal of the vertebrae. So this is a vertebral canal, and here you can see the spinal cord. And on the outside is the dura mater, but it is not stuck to the bone. There's a little space there. And this space is what we call the epidural space. So dura, epidural. Epidural means outside the dura. Okay. So there's an epidural space, and you might have heard of epidural anesthesia when for childbirth. Yeah, exactly. That's where they give the anesthesia, into the epidural space. So you have a painless labor. Under the dura, you have the arachnoid mater. Arachnoid means spider-like. So it's spider-like. If you see it, it's like a spider-like appearance. And below the arachnoid mater, there's a space. So we talked about the epidural space initially. That's outside the dura. And under the arachnoid, there's a subarachnoid space that contains the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid surrounds the spinal cord, and that's what keeps the environment of the spinal cord under control. So I told you the spinal cord ends at the medullary cone, that little cone-shaped area, right? So below that cone-shaped area, but you have the cauda equina coming out, all those nerves like a horse's tail. But the spinal cord is not present there. There's a lot of nerves there. And that is the area where you can do a spinal tap. Why do you need a spinal tap? Or what do you mean by a spinal tap? So if somebody has meningitis, what are the signs? Anybody? Fever, yes. Headache, very good. Vomiting. These are the three classic signs. First two are the most important. If you have these three signs, you should take that person to the doctor. Yeah.
I was actually wondering, are there more signs?
There are more signs. There are much more signs. There's the neck stiffness, there's a lot of things which happens. But as if one of your, if you know somebody who's suffering from these signs, you should tell them, go to the doctor. Because when you go to the hospital, the first thing they're going to do is a spinal tap. They go below the L1 because the spinal cord stops at L1. So they go below L1 and they pass a needle, and that area and they'll take some CSF from there, and that area is called the lumbar cistern. That's where they take a sample of the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so that's about the arachnoid mater, and below the arachnoid is the pia mater, and the pia mater is actually like a cling film over the spinal cord. It's adherent to the spinal cord. And I told you the pia mater is going to condense, and it forms a little ligament which connects the spinal cord to the coccyx. That's what stabilizes the spinal cord. Now here, I want you to know one condition called spina bifida, which is, excuse me, which is a birth defect. That's when the bony arch, so we have the vertebra, which is covering, but sometimes this vertebra can be deficient. So if there's a deficiency of the bony structure or the vertebral structure, then you can see the spinal cord is exposed, and this is called spina bifida. But surprisingly, and this was a big problem 50 years back, not 50, maybe 100 years back. But when women started taking folic acid, the problem suddenly came down. Now you hardly see it. I mean, you see it, but not to that extent. So folic acid was a simple solution for a major problem. So now during pregnancy, that's why doctors always give you folic acid during pregnancy. So if you look at the cross section of the spinal cord, you can see this darker area. Darker area is called the gray matter, and the light area around it is called the white matter. So this applies not only for the spinal cord, for the brain also. Brain also has got a gray matter and a white matter. So spinal cord has the same, but here the gray matter is like a H, or it's like a butterfly. So what is gray matter? Gray matter is a collection of the cell bodies of the neuron. You know, the neuron has got a cell body and has got an axon, right? A collection of the cell bodies is the gray matter. And a collection of the axons is the white matter. Why is it white? Because it's got myelin. So myelinated, the nerves, the axons have got a myelin cover, and that cover is what gives it the white color. So you have the gray matter and white matter. So why is the gray matter dull or gray? Because there's no myelin. So, and what's the purpose of myelin? Yes, it increases the speed of nerve conduction or nerve impulses. So it's like the white matter is like an information superhighway. Okay. Now, this is very important structure of the gray matter. Gray matter, especially for the practice, for the lab, you should know the gray matter has got dorsal horns. So here, before that, I want you to know what is dorsal and what is ventral. So dorsal means anything posterior is dorsal. And ventral means anything in the front, anterior. So ventral, dorsal. So from now on, we're going to say ventral and dorsal instead of anterior and posterior. That's how we refer to these structures in neurology. So you have two dorsal horns, which means they are the posterior horns. And here it's written posterior horns for your convenience. So there are two posterior horns, one on each side. And then there are two ventral horns, one on each side. And there are two lateral horns. So the three horns on each side, dorsal, ventral, and lateral. Now they have specific purpose. The dorsal horns are the sensory horns. That means they receive the information. And the ventral horns are the motor horns. They give out the information. So if you get hurt, the impulse is going to the receptors where the injury has happened is going to detect that injury, pass the information to the spinal cord. Where will it reach? Dorsal horn or ventral horn? Dorsal is sensory. So it has to be the sensory. So it has to be the dorsal horn, right? And you suddenly move your hand because there's some damage happening. So an order or an impulse has been given out to the muscle to contract and move away from that danger. Where does that come from? The ventral horn. You understand? One is receiving the impulse, the other one is giving out the impulse. So that's the difference between the dorsal horn and the ventral horn. I told you there are two lateral horns. They are associated with the fight and flight response or the sympathetic response, right? If you're in danger, what happens? You're in the fight and flight mode, sympathetic mode. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing starts increasing. All these things happen because there's a sympathetic response. And I told you these three horns are on either side, on the left side and right side, but there's a connection in the middle that is called the gray commissure. And in the middle of the gray commissure, there's a canal, and that's called the central canal. Now, we talked about the gray matter, and that's enough. Let's go into the white matter. The white matter, I told you, it consists of axons, myelinated axons. That's why it's white in color. And it's arranged into columns. So there are three columns. There's a dorsal column. This is a dorsal column. There's a ventral column. This is a ventral column. And there's a lateral column. Very similar. Okay? So these columns contains tracts. And some of the tracts are going up. What are the tracts going up? Sensory or motor? Because they're going to the brain, right? What goes to the brain? Sensory, correct. What goes from the brain out? Motor, right. I want you to get that concept, okay? One is ascending fibers, sensory, descending fibers, motor, okay? So you have to know that the brain is, or the spinal cord is having pathways which are transmitting impulses up and transmitting impulses down. One is a sensory pathway, one is a motor pathway, right? And all of those impulses which pass up and down is passing through the white matter, okay? Through the axons, myelinated axons. That's why it is white in color. Okay, are you with me, everybody? Getting in gist of it? Okay. So we are getting into the structure of the spinal cord now. I don't know what time is it now. Do you have a few minutes now? 5-10 minutes? Okay, so we'll move as much as we could. So here you can see this is a tract. So there are receptors. So you're touching, you're getting hurt, and the receptors in your hand or wherever it is taking the impulses, and the impulses come to the spinal cord. We said it comes to the dorsal horn because it's sensory impulses, pain impulses. It reaches there, then it crosses over to the opposite side. So that's called decussation. Decussation means crossing over. So if a tract has the origin of the impulse and the destination is here on the opposite side, because why? It crossed over here and then it went up into the brain. So in such a case, it's called a contralateral. So that means the origin of the impulse and the destination are on opposite sides. Is that clear? But sometimes it could be on the same side. It comes up here and goes straight up, and then it's called ipsilateral. So there are two words you need to know. Contralateral, which means on opposite side, which means decussation has happened. Decussation means crossing over. Okay, so crossing over has happened, and then it is called contralateral. If crossing over has not happened, that means it is ipsilateral. You got those two words? Understood? Okay. Here, I'll just go through the sensory tracts. So the dorsal column here, so if you look at the sensory tract or the ascending tract, which is in red color, you can see this is the dorsal column. The dorsal column has two tracts, and you have to know these two names, cuneate and gracile tracts. And these are the tracts which carry vibration, touch, and also proprioception. What do you mean by proprioception? Proprioception means it's a sense of position. So now, when I look at my hand, I know my hand is on the left side here at this level. That's because I see it. Say I close my hand, I close my eyes, and I don't see the hand. Can I touch my hand? You can. I'm not seeing it. Even if I move the hand a little bit, I can still touch it, right? That is because I don't see it. If I see it, I can go and touch it, but I have a sense of position. That means you can close your eyes and still know where your hand is. So this is a sense of position, and this is called proprioception. This is the easiest way to understand what proprioception is. So you have the cuneate tract, which carries signal from the upper part of the body that is above a spinal level called T6. T6 means thoracic vertebrae 6. Anything above that is coming through the cuneate tract, and gracile tract, or gracile, it's called fasciculus. Gracile tract carries signal from the below T6. So that is the dorsal column. So here, this column which we see is the dorsal column, two tracts there. And then there's an anterolateral column, which is on the lateral side. That contains a tract called spinothalamic tract, which is a tract for pain and temperature. So if you touch a hot object, something sharp, something painful, these are the tracts which carry those impulses. Spinothalamic tract is actually a 3-neuron pathway. The first neuron if it's time, just raise your hands and let me know. It's time? Oh, okay. I'll just finish the spinothalamic because this is quite important. You might get some questions in the exam. So let me quickly finish this one. So spinothalamic tract is a 3-neuron pathway. Why do you need 3 neurons in a pathway? Which means, it starts somewhere. There's another changeover to another neuron, and then it goes to another neuron. So there are 3 neurons in it. It's for more processing. So the first neuron is starting from the skin, and it is reaching the dorsal horn, which we said that's where it should reach. And then we said it is crossing over, and then it is going up, and then it reaches all the way like a single neuron here. It reaches the thalamus. Thalamus is very, very important. That is like a major stop center. It's like the bus depot in New York. So if you want to go to anywhere, and if you want to get down at New York, it's the bus depot. You have to go there, and that's where you get the next bus. If you want to go to Connecticut, then you have to get the bus. You have to change over there. That is the main hub. So the thalamus is very important in that aspect. It is where all the sensory input goes, and from there it will be directed to the correct areas. For example, the visual impression, what you see is because you have a center in the occipital lobe of the brain. And if you want to hear something, it is in temporal lobe of the brain. So each specific senses has got a particular area in the brain, and it's a thalamus which directs the impulses to the different section. So here you have the first set of neuron, second set of neuron, and the third set of neuron. Here it is going to the postcentral gyrus, which is the main sensory area. So the reason for having 3 sets of neuron is for more neural integration. Okay, so we'll stop here, and I'll post the remaining lecture on the on the internet.
All right.
Thank you.